Hey, thanks so much for finding the video. Do us a favor. If you haven't done so yet, please subscribe. Be sure to leave your comment. We love to interact. Enjoy the video. Mike, game week. I'm fired up for it. Unfortunately, though, we got
Me too.
Unfortunately, Mike, we got to unpack the poop show that was Monday night. But let me start, though, with the latest Saints injury report, which just came out. Marcus Davenport did finally practice, but he was limited. What do you make of where the Saints are with Davenport right now?
If he practices again tomorrow, then he's going to play Sunday night.
Okay.
Okay, I just look at it that he's on the field now practicing. That is a good sign.
Yeah.
That he's out there, and they need him. Okay, after the first quarter, where was the pass rush? No, nowhere. Come on, the MO on Carr, we talked about it last Thursday. I talked about it on the Saints radio network pregame, whatever. Was that, come on, you got to constantly be after him because it stays in his head, and he's going to throw you up a couple that you might be a chance at. The first quarter, what happened? You had to check his diaper. He wet the pants. He was holding on to the football way too long. He took a sack. I mean, he turned right into the players on that sack, and I've seen him do that before. Kind of like whirl around, he turns right into the sack. And then after that, what was Dennis Allen thinking? Come on, dude. And every week we go through this, and I don't think he'd mind me saying this, but, because it's obvious that, the key players for the Raiders were Josh Jacobs and Derek Carr. And, we knew about the speed of Ruggs, but, every week, Bobby and I talk about, give me a player. And I said Darren Waller. And so we talked about it on the pregame show for the Saints. And it's like, okay, if I knew it, come on. Have you not watched the film that this guy caught 90 passes a year ago and that only Travis Kelce caught more passes as a tight end than him? It's not like he just walked off the bus, and walked into the stadium. And the Saints had no clue for him. And I have an old coach live next to me, and he always brings this up. He said, listen, I got 58 years of experience in coaching. And there's a certain arrogance to coaches. And he said, this is what makes Belichick and Saban great. They don't have that arrogance about that another guy is better than the next one. And we think about it in life, and it's like that in a lot of categories too. You talk to a lot of people, that guy, he's not better than so-and-so, or he's not better than me. And there are people in life that are better than you. Okay, Darren Waller was better than anything that the Raiders had. You got to cover him. And I think we live in that society, not only coaches, but all of us, that, he ain't that good. No, he was that good. And no matter who you put on him, he got open.
Yeah.
One of the things with Belichick and Saban that make them great, they take one player out. And Saban learned that from Bill. And Bill learned that from Parcells. That, listen, take the best player out of that game, so to speak. Put him in a bad spot. And the Saints never put Waller in a bad spot, and he torched him every third down. Listen, it wasn't that difficult. I got a 15-month-old granddaughter that could have called that play to Waller. I mean, every third down. Come on, that wasn't that difficult at that point. And you just got beat up in every sense of the word. You got beat up in the trenches. And for the second straight week, Drew Brees played his age. Listen, nothing against what Drew has done in the past, and you got to call it as you see it. 2 games into the season, Drew, you can see some signs here of getting up in age. Okay, there's nothing wrong with that. The Broncos won a championship with Peyton Manning, and at that point in time, he couldn't play like what Drew can today.
True.
They won it with a great defense. They ran the football, and I'll never forget this. In watching the game, and I've said this a few times since that when the Saints signed Adrian Peterson, he came to camp. The great Jimmy Taylor gave me a call, and he's like, Mike, I'm reading this stuff from the Times-Picayune Advocate. about that Adrian Peterson's drank from the fountain of youth, and he's going to be this star running back and all. And he's in phenomenal shape and all that. And he said, first of all, let me tell you, my last year with the Saints, I was in the best shape of my career, and I couldn't play anymore. But I was in great shape. And he said, I'm going to tell you this. And he said, nothing against Peterson, because I think, it's a matter of time before it catches up with him. And he may have games where he plays really well, but then he's going to be witness protection the next. He said, my last 2 years with Green Bay, I could touch greatness every once in a while, but I couldn't do it game to game anymore. And he says, as you get old as a player, it's the consistency to play at that high level that we all think of with Drew is not there. And I think you're going to see a little bit more variances in his play, where I think he'll have a game where he can touch greatness. And it may be Sunday, where he comes out and he's unbelievable. But we almost got to the point where we take it for granted just how good he is, how good he was before. And now you're starting to see a little bit of that all sort of show up. And that's nothing negative toward Drew. I think he's the first one to see it. That's why he seriously considered retirement after last year. He sees it too, that he's not quite the same player. But I think Jimmy's comment about every once in a while I could touch that greatness, but my consistency level was never like it was, say, from 60 to 65 or 64. I couldn't do that anymore, game to game. I think you're seeing that with Drew. And that's not a negative. That's reality.
Mike, one more in this segment as we kind of unpack the game against the Raiders. We'll preview Sunday Night Football coming up here at the bottom of the hour. But this is a multifaceted question that kind of springs out of how much they miss Mike Thomas and what's wrong with the transition with Emmanuel Sanders. Why hasn't that gone more smoothly?
You miss Michael Thomas? Well, yeah. You look at his career. I mean, it don't take a rocket scientist. And listen, I beat the drum about this because I got somebody that's in my ear constantly about next man up. And I always tell him, tell me who that next man is.
Yeah.
Because that's a difference. He don't want to believe it either, that there are people in this world that are better than the others. Michael Thomas is a cut and a half or two cuts better than anybody the Saints have at wide receiver. It's obvious. Darren Waller played the Michael Thomas role Monday night. No matter what you did, he got open, he made the catch. And that's what Mike does. Yeah, you miss him in that spot. I think just because of the peculiar offseason and everything that goes along with it, that has to play a part in the connection with Drew and Emmanuel Sanders. Okay, you can go out in the practice field in Colorado, but that ain't a game. Man, listen, Allen Iverson said it best. Practice is practice. It ain't a game. We talking about practice. It's totally different in a football game. And you saw what the Raiders did. They sort of rotated coverage toward Emmanuel's side of the field. And they took basically Cook out of his game. They took Sanders out of his game. No, listen, I think the biggest thing I walk away from that game was John Gruden and his staff coached the pants off of Sean Payton and his staff. Come on. You can't watch that game and say, who has more talent on that team? Come on. Obviously, the Saints have more talent. But the better team won that night, and that was the Raiders. They utilized every inch of ground. The rushing game, it was nothing to write home to mama about. But every time they needed that 3rd and 2, that, that 4th and 1, man, it was Josh or it was Richard from Alexandria. So they got it done, and it was Gruden-like, unconventional. I grinded out. I hold on to the football. Time of possession was unbelievable. How they just controlled everything and kept Drew Brees watching. He wasn't playing. He was watching. And that was a masterful coaching job by John Gruden and his staff on a big stage, a lot of people watching, and how they took away bits and pieces of the Saints offense. And, man, that team on defense, They ain't ain't sending many people to the Pro Bowl on that defensive. But they knew how to kind of scheme up against Sean and his offense. I thought they did a tremendous job, and to me, that was the first big impression of how well Gruden had his team ready, focused, and they showed a little bit. I don't say a little bit because it's early in the year. They showed some mental toughness to play through a really bad first quarter when it almost got away from them.
Mike, let's start with Mississippi State's offense against the LSU defense, because I think that's where the most intrigue is, with a new defense with Bo Pelini and a very different, obvious offense with Mike Leach. How does that matchup shake up?
Well, one thing I knew, Mike ain't changing nothing.
Right?
Yeah, never changed nothing in his life about running that offense. And it's air raid. Man, listen, they're going to throw the football. They're going to spread you out, and they're going to throw the football all over the field. The big obstacle here is confusing or affecting Costello's throws. That's going to be the measure here. What I want to see is, how does he incorporate maybe the best running back he's ever had in Hill? Because that guy, had he come out early, and I think he really thought about it, and actually at first sort of announced, well, I'm coming back, I'm going out, and then he kind of changed his mind and decided to come back for another season. He'd have been a top 100 pick. Now, running backs are sort of devalued, but he'd have went in the first 3 rounds of the draft. He's a really good running back. How does he get him involved in what he does best? Because all running backs, they love to touch the football as a rusher 15, 18 times, and a couple times to 4 to 5 as a receiver. How does Mike incorporate that in his offense? But I think the big key here is early pressure on Costello. I've watched at Stanford. He's a guy that holds on to the football. I mean, he throws the pass when the receiver is open. He's not the greatest anticipation guy. That was part of the knock on him at Stanford. Just throw it. It's almost like you had it on a yo-yo. Come on, dude, get rid of it. And so, now, again, how long that lasts with Leach, who's the guy of, man, come on, get rid of it. Look what Minshew did at Washington State. The great thing about Gardner was there, man, he was throwing but anticipating that receiver being open. The one thing I noticed with Costello at Stanford, and maybe he's improved in that category, he don't throw nothing until the receiver is wide open. Now, you do that against this defense, dude, he's going to be seeing the stadium, the skylight. I mean, you're going to be looking up at the sky. In that offense, it's built upon getting the football out quick, fast, and throwing it to an area. And hopefully the receiver's there. You got to throw it before the cut, before the break. They do throw a lot of wide receiver screens, and I think Costello will be pretty good doing that. I saw him do that a lot also at Stanford. Remember, too, how Stanford was built and how he did it also in high school. He had a big tight end. And so that's not really been a staple of Mike Leach's offense, no matter where he's been. He's been a guy that loves to throw it out and multiple receiver sets and trying to get a mismatch where that defensive back makes, not say a physical mistake, a mental mistake, and the coverage breaks down. So that's going to be the thing with Bo early on, is more of a mental game with his defensive backs, making sure you're in the right spot, that sort of thing, because Mike does kind of hit the pressure points across the board here. And he tries to get that matchup that he will get a young player to make a mistake, and you got 7 points on the board. But if you think Mike Leach is going to change because he's in the SEC, man, you can forget about that. Leach ain't never going to change for nothing. I mean, that he built his career off of what he does, and so that part's not going to change. The big thing is we're going to find out pretty early about 2 things. One, is Costello a good fit in his offense, that he will anticipate that receiver and make that throw ahead of time, how accurate he is with that? And secondly, we'll find out a little bit about LSU's pass rush off the edge.
So, Mike, that's where I wanted to go, because people have asked me, what are you most interested to see? For me, it's defensive ends. I mean, I know Brent and all that stuff, but switching to a 4-3, do they have that guy? And Mike, I don't know. I haven't seen any of these guys play. So, I mean, give me something, man. Give me Ali Gay, B.J. Ojolari, Andre Anthony, Trevez Moore. We've heard all these names, but we've seen none of them do anything. So what do we expect Saturday?
Yeah, and, one of the things with Bo, you recall back to when he was at LSU, of how they use LaRon Landry. And, LaRon was like the queen piece in football chess for him. And he moved him all over the board. I think you're going to see him blitz Jacoby Stevens a lot. And I would against this team because I think I can make Costello uncomfortable in the pocket. I don't know enough about the other guys. And I'm intrigued with B.J. Ojolari because from day one, Coach has talked about B.J. There's not a one interview that B.J. Ojolari is not brought up in the conversation.
You're right.
So he sees something in him, and he's trying to tell you, hey, this guy has got a chance to be really good. Lately, he's talked it up about Ali Gay. Now, I will be honest, Matt, on the hoof, he looks like the guy. Yeah. Because he's 6'6", and maybe a little change, and he's built. Man, if you were to carve out a defensive end, that's what you would want. The one thing you noticed with him in junior college, he beat most guys with speed. His ability to come off that line of scrimmage, man, he used those long arms like a big condor, and pow, he's in the backfield. And so he gives you problems, and he's got good closing speed. How well Mississippi State can combat his speed quickness? Do they do it with power? Because a lot of times that's the big change between a small college and JUCO into, say, the SEC. It's more of a power game. And I'm intrigued because, again, one guy he's brought up numerous times is Andre Anthony. And he's talked about Andre, that this is his year. This is his opportunity. So I really want to see BJ and Ali Gay because those two guys, if you go back to every interview he's done with anybody, I think over the last month, I don't think he's done one without mentioning BJ and Ali Gay.
You're right.
And so,
hey, Mike, this week when the players did interviews, they asked Brennan and Damone Clark that question, who's the best pass rusher? Both of them said B.J. Ojolari.
Yeah.
Everybody's saying it.
So that tells me one thing. He's pretty doggone good because, I've known Coach O for quite some time now. Listen, he ain't blowing the horn about no cat that he think might do it. He's blowing the horn about a guy he thinks can do it. And listen, he's coached 11 first-round pick defensive linemen in his life. So he does know a thing or two about defensive linemen, and he's brought that up. Now, Ali, I think, is the type of guy that if he gains a little bit of confidence, he could really be something. Because, man, he's on the hoof, too. He looks it. Now, can he measure up from the power standpoint? And I think the same thing with BJ. He's never played up against a power player like what he's going to see in the SEC, and how that sort of maybe combats things a little bit. And, everybody wants, I want that 10-sack. I got one guy locally here. Well, man, y'all talk about Caleb on Chasson. He ain't doing nothing. No, he's affecting every damn play. They got two guys blocking him. Other than the Texas game, man, those guys, he don't understand the fact that if you don't get a sack, then you're not a great pass rusher. No, a lot of times you dictating the defense. They don't have a Chasson on that team this year. Because we don't know that. Now, BJ may turn into that, and Ali Gay may turn into that type player, but the expectations are there, too, that, but we go into 4-3, watch all the sacks. Watch that jump up. Early on, there's a little bit of an adjustment with that. And I think the key player up front, though, I'll be honest with you, is Glenn Logan.
Glenn's a guy who Ed Ogeron raved about a year ago at this time. Mike, flip it. Quick thought. We'll flip it. Zach Arnett, new defensive coordinator at Mississippi State. I don't know a lot of people don't know a lot about Arnett because he was at a smaller school in San Diego State but had a lot of success. So how might that matchup look with this LSU offense? So much to talk about Brennan, of course, but just against what we would expect to see from that Mississippi State defense.
All I know is Arnett ain't seen no talent like what he's going to
No
see
doubt.
on the field Saturday. And that type speed. Because you can say, oh, man, come on. We can duplicate that in practice. Okay, I'm going to clean up my language. I'm going to say that that's incorrect. You can't duplicate none of that. The things that jump out to me for Arnett and also for LSU is, last year at this time, what did Coach O say to start the season about his offense? I want to be 50-50, right?
Yeah.
I want to run the ball 50% of the time, throw it 50% of the time. And I always do this by quarters. I'm going to have to change that up this year because we ain't got no quarters. But last year in the first quarter of play for LSU, they threw the football 53% of the time. They ran it 47%. You know what they finished the season with?
60-40?
No, 52% and a half and 47% and a half.
You know what?
It stayed.
I think I remember us talking about that, Mike, that they did finish really close to 50-50, which seemed...
I mean, it really, really close there. So that's telling you that Ed did exactly, and the play callers with Ensminger and Brady did exactly what he wanted. He kept you on your heels a little bit. I'm interested to see if that number gets... maybe tilted a little bit more toward the running game, because I think with a young quarterback, his best friend is going to be the running game. And if you're looking at a strength on LSU's team, it's the running back core with Chris Curry, with Tyron Davis-Price, with John Emery, and getting them involved and see how that'll roll with it, especially against that defense, because that's different. The personnel on Mississippi State's totally different from the personnel that Dan Mullen recruited there when they had all those studs up front. Man, they had some big-time players along that defensive line, and that was an impressive group. And Jonathan Abram, who they played up front almost like another linebacker. They don't have that type of guy, this year. So he's going to find out real quick. Man, San Diego State and who you got to play, and playing in the SEC is different. The other thing, too, is last year, which to me was amazing, LSU ran 1,080 offensive plays.
Okay.
They had 12 turnovers.
Yeah.
7 interceptions, 6 by Joe, 1 by Miles, 5 fumbles. And they took the football away 25 times, so you will plus 13 giveaway, takeaway. I think Ed would want that number takeaway to still, that first number to be a 3, and then whatever happens afterwards happens. But I think that's the one thing with Bo. I think they're going to be aggressive. And I look for that turnover number to jump from 25 of a year ago and try to getting it into the 30s. And for Ed, I think he wants to keep that first number a 1, on the turnover part on his side of the football. But it's just amazing to me that in 1,080 plays, you turned it over 12 times. I mean, that's remarkable. In the season, as long as you played it, that's all you did.
Yep. And
so that's that. The other part, too, is how you smoke teams in the first half of games. You outscored opponents 415 to 145. They saw your gas fumes coming out the back. And some teams did. The only team that reacted decently toward it was Ole Miss.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody else sort of, what the world was that? Because, you weren't expecting that from an LSU team. Now, the expectations is high, but you don't have the experience that you had a year ago, especially in the receiving core and up front and Lloyd. I'm just telling you, and listen, I'm hoping for the best with Liam, and I know he's smart enough to play that center position, but just how difficult it is, especially early in the year, to get 5 guys to play as one. And Lloyd was unbelievable, just an unbelievable talent at LSU. That's why he's starting in Denver.
No kidding, right?
Talking about a rookie starting at center in the NFL. And Liam's, I think, is a good player, and he has started at guard and tackle. Man, center's a different position because you in charge, Jack. The buck stops with you. You got to make all those calls for the guards and tackles, and also, too, in critical situations, if your quarterback gets a little bit amped up, one of the things that's underrated about Lloyd, if Joe would get, like he was touching the electrical wire, Lloyd would pull his hand away, at different times. Now that goes on in the huddle and behind the scenes. People don't see that. And can Liam be that type of guy with Miles? Because you're going to have those moments. All I'm telling you is Arnett's in for a pretty big challenge, and I just can't wait to watch Eric Gilbert, because that's the other guy. Now, we've talked about what Ed's talked about Jabril Cox so much, and he's certainly Stingley. What more can you say about him? And he's talked about BJ. But has he talked about an offensive player more than he's talked about Gilbert?
Mike, it ain't just Ed. It's everybody talking about that cat.
No, every player on the team is. Yeah. I'm glad he's with us and I don't have to play him.
All right, Mike D. Saints back at home. A similar spot a year ago. Week 2 loss on the road. A daunting Week 3 opponent. A year ago without Drew Brees, they go to Seattle and win. Now they got Aaron Rodgers and the Packers coming to the Dome on Sunday Night Football. What's the key thing that we're watching here for Saints and Packers?
Well, key for me is the health of Devontae Adams. He did not practice today. He's had a hamstring injury. Does he practice tomorrow? Now, listen, you can't fool me, because this is the same sort of stuff with Mike Evans.
Yep.
Oh man, he ain't going to play. His hamstring has been – all of a sudden, he goes to Lord's. They put their hands on him and he plays. Come on, I ain't falling for that. But again, if he's not 100%, then it's different. This team has changed with the coaching change because of the fact that they've become a much more run-oriented team with Aaron. And Jones is a really good player. I mean, he's leading the league in rushing. And so that tells you the Packers have great confidence in him. And what did they do in round 2 last year? They picked this big heavyweight bulldozer from Boston College and C.J. Dillon, in round 2. I would have thought they'd pick a receiver, give Rodgers a little bit of help. They didn't do that. And so I think that's a big key. You cannot give them down and distance situations that's easy for Rodgers. And again, I think it's all about pressure. I think Aaron is like anyone else. He is not going to like that guy in his face. For the Saints, I flipped that film on and what the 49ers did twice to them last year. They beat the holy you-know-what out of them by running the ball. Sean's got to be patient in this football game, but I'd stick it to him, especially with Kenny Clark, who's battling an injury right now. But you watch those 49er games against them. They took it to him, and it was nothing fancy. I think Garoppolo, did he throw like 12 or 14 passes in the entire game, the NFC Championship game? I mean, they just ran it at them and pounded them into the turf. My thing is, it ain't rocket science, guys. Go back to what happened there against Green Bay and run the football. Show a little bit more patience with your running game, and I think it would open things up for your passing game. Last week, Monday night, I should say, not giving Latavius Murray the football more. I don't know what's going on with not getting him more involved. Same thing with Taysom and him running the football. But, man, I've noticed one thing. The Packers this offseason, name me one signature player they got on defense that they acquired. Free agency or the draft. They didn't do nothing.
Yeah.
Their first 2 picks was a quarterback and a running back. So, they spent a lot of money 2 years ago in getting the 2 pass rushers. And they've spent a lot of money in the secondary. But my thing about it is, I saw them cats doing a lot of Ole moves, getting out of the way of them 49er running backs. And you know what? It's not a fantasy football. It's real-life football. Notice the kink in the chain for a defense. And I think if you're patient and run the football against the Packers, I think you got something there. And the only thing, too, with Sean, and we've seen it every year, last year going to the Rams, and then everybody, the sky's falling down. Oh, my God. No Drew Brees, and they wheeled off 5 straight wins. The year before, they got beat by Fitzmagic in week 1, and had the Browns played Baker Mayfield instead of Tyrod Taylor, they'd have beat them, too, in that game. The year before, they 0-2. They lose to the Vikings, and they lose to the Patriots. Sean has talked about, listen, we got to get off to a fast start. We got to get off to a fast start. It's imperative for this football team. And like you said, we've fought it before being down 0-2, but it exudes a lot of energy. Let's get off to a fast start. They were embarrassed. They didn't get beat against the Raiders. They got embarrassed against Las Vegas. And in that spot, normally the next game, Sean comes up with a pretty good game plan. And that's why the line odds makers got the Saints as a favorite.
Mm-hmm.
Because, history does repeat itself a lot. It has the same ring, especially if you're a gambler. It has a similar ring to it, so to speak.
You gamble, Mike?
Define gambling.
I guess it's not gambling if you know.
Yeah, you get it. Every once in a while, and I did much better on college football last weekend than pros, but whatever, it's week 2, and so it'll be good. But I will say this, that I do have seen this before with Sean early in the season, their team lay an egg, just not play well, and then bounce right back.
Yeah.
And I expect you're going to see that against the Packers. They were embarrassed. They just didn't get beat. They were embarrassed against the Raiders. And I suspect that they're going to have a pretty good game plan up against them. But, the one thing with Green Bay, they're just not a pass-happy football team like we've seen in the past. They're going to run the football. So first things first, you better stop Jones. If you don't, you're in for a long afternoon, because they did see that film of the Raiders and how they control the clock.
All right, Mike, let's start in Tiger Stadium. LSU welcomes in Mississippi State. How do you see it going Saturday at 2:30?
This is a toughie for me. I'll be honest. Not who wins, but by how much. And seeing what Leach does offensively and seeing what LSU, returns back and everything. I picked it 40-23 LSU.
40-23 for the Tigers. And what about on Sunday Night Football?
I think it comes down to a late field goal, 27-24 Saints. I think this is close. I think the Saints play much better. Well, they couldn't play any worse
no doubt.
than they played the last 3 quarters. But, the Packers are a good football team. They've used a lot of football capital on the defensive side of football, and they love to run the football. I think this game's close. Will Lutz, I think, ends it 27-24 Saints.
I'll take it however they can get it. All right, your questions for Mike D. You know the drill. Let's get to them. We'll start via email. Here's Warren, who said, ask Mike, why is Zach Bond not playing?
That would have to be assignment to me. Knowing, cause listen, when you're out in professional football, it's not knowing it every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
You got to know it every play. You don't want to and playing and him guessing against what they were doing against the Raiders. No. And Zach, to me, I think where you're going to see him early is as a designated pass rusher. I think because that's his strength as a player, that he knows how to rush the quarterback. It's not in reverse. Not that he can't do it, but that's his strength. But I think it's assignment. You got to know what to do on every play, not every once in a while, and that may be in question at this point.
Mark Shelton on Twitter asked Mike, are the Saints still seeking depth by way of a trade on either side of the ball?
I would never rule it out. Sean's always an aggressive coach, and so I would never rule that out. Because that's been his MO, that he's never satisfied with his roster. He's willing to do what he's got to do. Look what they did to try to get Clowney.
Yeah.
That should answer the question real quickly. I think they would do what they had to do to add a signature player if they could.
Bayou Ford YouTube chat, Kevin Monjour says, ask Mike, with the report that the Saints had interest in Tom Brady if Brees retired, do you believe this influenced Brees to return?
No, I think it was all on Drew. I always thought he would come back. I did not think it was as serious of him thinking about retirement as now it's being put out there. So I don't think Brady, getting into the mix had anything to do with Drew returning. But, more and more now, when you start to kind of put the pieces in place, I do think, as I said before, the next quarterback for the Saints as a starter is not on this roster.
Bronson on Twitter. You know you got a fan when this question's asked this way. Ask Mike, will the air raid venture into the piranha water?
Well, I've seen Costello enough, and if he's crazy enough to throw it in that area, he gonna get bit. I'm just telling you, he's gonna find out real quick, man. This ain't Pac-12 football, real fast. He ain't never played up against a cat like that. And the other guy too is Jabril Cox. I'm just telling you, everybody I talk to, I don't care if it's a coach or a player, they talk about all these guys, and they say, man, but I think Jabril Cox may be a superstar player here at LSU.
Let's see if we get a couple of more in here. Daniel Cass in the Bayou Ford YouTube chat asked Mike, why isn't Adam Troutman playing yet? Do you expect him to get on the field in the next game or two?
Yeah, well, he caught a catch against the Raiders, so he has played. He played in week 2 against Las Vegas, so he did make a catch downfield for the Saints. And I expect that Adam, similar to Zach, it's not that he can't play, but you got to know your assignments all the time. And I think by the end of the year, you're going to see a lot of Adam Troutman because you got to build that rapport with Drew. And I think that's part of it right now.
Mike, 20 seconds. Jimmy Henry, what's up with Ruiz? Ask Mike.
What's up with him? Meaning,
is he going to start? Going to play? What are we going to see?
I think he starts.
Okay. All right. Mike Detillier, saintsreport.com, MikeDetillier.com, part of the Saints News Network over at SI.com. Read his stuff and listen to him right here with us every Thursday on AFR. You the man, Mike D. Enjoy the football this weekend, man. We'll talk next week.
Thank you, Matthew.
Hey, thanks so much for watching. Please leave your comments. I love to interact, and be sure to hit the red subscribe button below.